Miranda Gohh is changing and shaping the face of Broadway in significant ways. She is founder of the Theater Producers of Color organization, an educational program for BIPOC producers, and co-founder of the Industry Standard Group, the first BIPOC commercial theater investment and producing organization. What I love about talking with Miranda is both her deep knowledge of the industry and her real life experience. She knows what it takes to be a producer, and she is carving the path for others to follow in meaningful ways. Listen in. Hi, Miranda. Welcome to the podcast. How are you today?
Good. Happy holidays.
Thank you. Happy holidays to you. I can't believe we get you for you've been an incredible year, nonstop. Are you catching your breath? How do you catch your breath when you go nonstop like this?
A lot of sleep and eating more nutritious food and taking care of my body.
Oh, that's so important. Good for you. Good for you. I loved meeting your friend and talking about the experience that he had with you on the train as I had with you on the train, which is every moment you've got to take advantage of, right? Filling out things coming and going. Describe this year. What are your big takeaways? Are you in the reflective mode? What are your big takeaways from this year?
Yeah. So I started in Ken Davenport's office, who's a Broadway producer whom you know and are close friends with as well, as his associate producer last fall. So it's always sort of been my long-term goal to study the craft of commercial producing in the theater world. And that's sort of what it's been this year, a crash course in the thing. So over the course of this past year, we've been focusing on 4 different musicals, all of which I believe they're world premieres this year. So the first one was Harmony by Barry Manilow and Bruce Sussman. That was at the National Yiddish Theater off Broadway in New York. And the second was the Neil Diamond musical, which had its tryout in Boston over the summer and then is now officially on Broadway as of this month, a musical comedy called Broadway Vacation, The Griswolds Broadway Vacation by Steve Rosen and David Rosmer. That tried out in Seattle. And last but not least, Joy, which just opened, I guess, a week ago at George Street Playhouse in New Brunswick, New Jersey. So it's a lot about seeing how musicals of this scale get made and how you push them along and get them to the next step. So that's been a lot of what this year has looked like for me.
It's incredible. Congratulations. Amazing. You and I had a conversation about repping, doing the reps, seeing a show come up, do a workshop, open, and then doing that again. How has that accelerated your learning to be able to do that with so many musicals this year?
I definitely believe that in terms of producing, you learn by doing and by being in the room, which is why the opportunity to serve as an investor or co-producer on a show is so valuable. But for me, each show has also been its totally unique thing, and no 2 shows are alike. So to be able to see how decisions are made as producers and what shows respond to certain audiences and some not has been very informative. So I think to your point of reps, right, the number of marketing and press meetings you can be in, the number of texts and late nights at the theater and, sensing the needs of your cast and crew and listening to the needs of the show. The more you do that, the more confident you'll be when it comes time to do your own show.
Oh, it's so true. You and I have shared a late night car ride home from an out of town into the city, 2 a.m., 3 a.m. Those meetings are important and they're real. Let's talk about, I feel like you wear so many hats so well, Miranda, both as the producer and the investor. This is a podcast dedicated to first-time investors and emerging producers, and you do both. Let's talk about being a producer of producers. There's not very many. I can think of 2. You're one of 2 that are producer of producers. Can we lead with like theater producers of color, that fabulous Los Angeles Times article, like the traction? You should hear how people talk about you when you're not in the room, like with so much respect and like, you're doing the work, you're changing what Broadway looks like and acts and the shows that are happening. Like, where are you? Maybe not so much about how it got started and why it got started, but like, where are you now with theater producers of colors and where do you want to be?
Yeah, with Theater Producers of Color, for those who don't know, it's an organization aimed at providing access to education, training, and mentorship for up-and-coming theater producers of color, acknowledging that there's sort of a lack of producers of color present on Broadway. So, we just wrapped up our second year of the program. Our main initiative is a 10-week Producing 101 course where each year we accept up to 25 participants to take a 10-week course. And every Monday they'll hear from a different guest speaker, whether it's a producer, a general manager, an attorney, you name it, in the theater world, and with the hopes that they get an inside look at what it takes to be a commercial producer and really learn the nuts and bolts of the craft of what we do. So we just finished our second year. We have 51 alums at this point, which is amazing. It was a project that started in the pandemic. So at this point is a hybrid of virtual and in-person learning, but that means that we're able to have participants in New York, LA, Chicago, to as far as New Zealand and Japan and Brazil. So it's sort of been amazing to see the reach of this project. And where we are now, we're gearing up to launch our third year in mid-January. So we'll be ushering in a new cohort of 25 up-and-coming producers. The incredible producer Sammy Lopez, who is sort of championing a lot of new musicals himself, will be our program mentor, so sort of being the guide for this new cohort. And it's really about equipping them with the knowledge to apply to their own projects. So like what I was saying before, they come out of it confident enough to know how to move their projects from point A to point B and can sort of call upon the different resources and networks that they've been tapped into to help push those projects along as well. So it's very exciting stuff. The community, first and foremost, that we've grown has been amazing, and we're all friends and partners, and people have started production companies out of it. So it's definitely a proud achievement in the broad realm of things that have evolved over the past few years.
It's got to be gratifying to know that you feel the need, that something that wasn't there before, that you've been able to create and launch the careers of, I can't believe how many people. That's amazing.
Thank you. Yeah.
That's so cool. Let's talk about, Miranda, the investment part of it. So I want to lead with the idea that you and I both have had the experience of like investing in a show that didn't recoup. And it's such a punch to the gut, right? Like I wish it were different. And it made me like think about why I'm investing and how I invest differently. But talk about seeing shows that you're passionate about close, and like, what are those conversations either internally or like with investors or with like close friends? Like, how do you, what's the fallout of that? Like, how do you process that? That's the question.
Yeah, I think it's no secret that Broadway and theater in general finds itself in unprecedented times where the markets and the trends that we've sort of seen and relied upon in past years is not the same post-pandemic. So I think that points to a number of things, but for those looking to invest directly in shows, I think you always have to be aware that the likelihood of recouping your investment is not a high one. It's a risky investment, but we see dozens of new shows on and off Broadway open every year, so that it means that people are still crazy enough to do it because they love the art and the stories that are being told, and they love the power of theater and how it can change people's lives. So aside from my work with Ken, have had roles on other projects this year where I was raising money from different investors. And, a lot of those shows struggled. One was a musical off Broadway, Kinky Boots, that, opened end of the summer and, had a big splashy brand name that had done very well on Broadway. But we just struggled to recapture those audiences post-pandemic, and that had a much shorter life than anticipated. And then I also raised for a new musical on Broadway called K-pop that did enormously well off Broadway around 2017 and transferred to Circle in the Square this year, this fall. And we had high hopes for that musical, but again, it just struggled to find its audiences, and we're struggling at the box office to the point where the lead producers had to make the decision to close it much earlier than anyone could have imagined. So both very sad and disappointing experiences, I think, for everyone involved. But I think the lessons learned from that are, you have to be aware that, whatever it is, it might seem like a sure bet, but there is no such thing in the world that we exist in. So I think you have to lead with passion and why you're driven to help share this story with the world, but also, be aware of the market that we operate in and the financial model, to sort of get the best idea of how an investment like you may be making could behave.
What advice would you give, Miranda, to investors that are contemplating making an investment, specifically to first-time investors? Like, what are those? What are the talking points? What are the cautions that you share with people? What are those conversations like?
You can get a number of things out of being an investor. One, obviously, the financial participation. You like in my case with K-pop, a lot of my investors were first-time investors who, first and foremost, wanted to support me and my career, and also Asian American stories. So it should be something that you'd be proud to see on stage. You should also see it as an opportunity to learn about commercial producing and investing in the theater. If for example, you're an aspiring producer or just want to get your foot in the door in the world that we operate in, then investing is a good way to do that. And you should really be thorough in reading over all the paperwork and asking the lead producers all any questions you have, because that's their job to answer all of that and to bring you into the world in the way that you'd like. So, parts of the paperwork that I'd recommend being thorough with are the operating and subscription agreements. There's also recoupment charts, which are sort of the biggest tool that investors use to measure a show's financial viability, right? So a recoupment chart lays out what the break-even point for a show is, right? So let's say it costs $500,000 to run a show every week. That means you have to earn at least $500,000 to break even. And, the recoupment chart shows at what percentage of the theater capacity needs to be filled every week to recoup your initial investment. So it might say, if we are selling out at 100%, and grossing $1 million every week, then it will take us 30 weeks to recoup the entire capitalization of, let's say, $10 million. So I think that is a good tool to look at and to ask questions about. And, all of that are sort of estimates, right? We can say we think if we're selling out at 100%, we'll gross $1 million a week, but you should look at how other shows are performing on Broadway now. The grosses in our industry are made available to the public. So you can see what similar shows are grossing and what their average ticket price is. And, if it looks like most musicals are actually grossing like around $750 to $800, you should ask, why do you think this show will be able to make $1 million at the sold out capacity? So I think that's a good learning tool. And also included in those documents are the operating budgets, how much it takes to run a show every week, and the production budget, how much it costs to get a show up to opening night. So those are good tools to look at to become sort of more financially literate in the commercial producing world.
That's really helpful. Those details are so important, especially for first-time investors. If they don't have some of those documents, they should definitely ask the producers or whoever is bringing them into the project about those important documents. And for, first-time producers to know that this is what the investor expects. So all of that is really helpful. You've worked with a number of different producers, Miranda, even in like the last year and a half. Can you talk about qualities, traits that you admire? So for first-time producers to be able to emulate some of these qualities, what are you seeing in a successful producer?
Usually successful producers are good communicators, right? So it's not just the people on stage getting the show up every night. It's the pool of investors that actually bring the show to fruition. So that might be, in some cases, maybe a handful of investors. In other cases, it might be hundreds of investors. So I think good lead producers communicate well to their investors and co-producers, meaning, they'll provide regular updates on how the show is performing or how tech or rehearsals are going, might provide some marketing updates. I think that's a trait that Ken is very good at. He has been very welcoming of investors and co-producers participating in the process, whether that's sitting in on something or, just answering any and all emails or taking a call. So I think being prepared to be accessible and ready to investors and co-producers is a good trait. Other producers that I've worked with, I think there's an interesting conversation right now in terms of equity, diversity, and inclusion on Broadway. So it's always admirable to hear different producers' thoughts on how not only to be innovative in the world of Broadway, but to also making the industry better by bringing the show to life. So, K-pop was one of the few shows in Broadway history that had an almost all Asian and Asian American cast. So that was important to me, and not only the people on stage, but the crew, the PAs, the interns, the fellows, all were thoughtfully, those teams were thoughtfully put together to be as representative of the story being told on stage. So I think that is an interesting area that producers can lean into as well. So I think those are important traits. You should look at each producer's track record and see where they've had their successes and where they've had their failures. But I think first and foremost, it's the story being told and whether you trust the person at the helm to tell that story accurately and well.
How would somebody find out like the track record of a producer, whether we don't really talk or there's not a whole lot of news made of recoupment or not? I mean, when the show recoups, we hear about it, but how would people research that to find out more about the lead producer?
Yeah, there's a database that's managed by the Broadway League, which is the trade organization for Broadway producers. And there's a database called IBDB where you can look up each producer. So, for example, you might look up Ken Davenport and all of his shows that he's had any affiliation with. are listed there. So you'll see A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical, Once on This Island, Getting the Band Back Together, Spring Awakening, the revival. And so that's available for all producers. It's available for me. So you can sort of get a sense of their taste. It's true that you usually only hear about a show's recoupment if they do successfully recoup. Usually that's a press release. So, you can do an easy Google search and search, for example, maybe this is a no-brainer, but Hamilton recoupment, and it will tell you it recouped in however many weeks. But you can sort of get a good sense. Like, for example, you'll see that K-pop only ran for maybe like 30 performances or so. So obviously that is a show that did not recoup. So I think you can sort of educate yourself in that way and become familiar with a person's taste and track record in that way.
Oh, that's really helpful. You've talked with a lot of investors, first-time investors. What do they get most excited about?
I think investors get most excited about seeing the show up on its feet. There's a lot of perks that come with being an investor. Usually they're invited to the opening night performance of a show, which is always fun. We typically have some fancier people, celebrities who walk the red carpet and who are in line with you during intermission to get a drink. There's an after party where everyone celebrates together with the cast and the crew and all the special guests. So obviously that's a lot of fun to really feel like you're in it and celebrating with everyone that worked to get this show on stage. So I think, opening nights are always really fun. I think if a show is really hot, for example, like A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical, seeing the show in the press is really exciting, right? So getting to see us on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon and saying, oh, that's my show, or the Thanksgiving Day parade, and sending those clips to your friends and family and posting on Facebook. I think that's sort of like always a proud investor moment. And then the other big press moment for Broadway is, of course, the Tony Awards in June. So if a show is lucky enough to get nominated and receive any of those awards, that's always something that I think people are proud to be a part of as well.
Oh, that's awesome. Very good. Talk about Miranda, where you would like to see Broadway even in the next 3 years. That's pretty fast, but you're planting a lot of seeds. How do you see Broadway being different? How do you see the good things continuing? What does it look like in 3 years?
It's hard to say where I think it will be, but one of my hopes is that we do begin to usher in new audiences. Theater, specifically musical theater in the United States, is a relatively young art form. So, before I had this role in commercial producing, I was working at the nonprofit Manhattan Theater Club, and there's a whole landscape of nonprofit theaters that were started in about the 70s by these truly visionary artists. And a lot of those artists who started those companies are still in the same leadership positions today. And a lot of the audiences that started with those theaters in the 70s and the 80s are still the core subscribers and members of those theaters today. So I think we are at sort of a generational pivot point where, there's a lot of younger people who don't have the same relationship with theater that maybe the folks who helped start those theaters in the 70s and 80s and 90s have. And, the younger generations, the Gen Z, the millennials, have so many competing forms of entertainment now where it's so much easier to just stay at home and find something good, whether it's TV or film. So I'm interested to see what sort of content in the theater world will bring in these newer audiences and how the marketing will evolve to also make sure that they're invited to have a seat at the table, and that, it's truly an ushering in of a new generation in a way that I don't think we've quite seen yet. So I think that's one area. And then I also think with the flip side of that are the producers who will start to widen their practice and become more present and active in the producing community. So I think, with the 51 alums and theater producers of color, a number of those alums had their Broadway and off-Broadway producing debuts this year on Kinky Boots, on A Beautiful Noise, the Neil Diamond musical, on The Piano Lesson on Broadway. So that all happened relatively fast. So I think that will just continue to happen. So I think, in the next 3 years, we'll also start to see some new power players in the industry bringing their own shows to the stage. And I think hopefully in turn, bringing in new audiences with them as well.
Miranda, you are like knocking on the doors, banging down the doors of those production companies saying, hey, we need share some of the capitalization with TPOC. We want to be able to raise for your show. What are those conversations like? Like, how are you received? Like, how... is there lynch point moments where they're like, okay, we're going to do it? Or they're like, absolutely. Like, what are those conversations like?
Yeah, to be honest, I never imagined theater producers of color would become a producing organization. So the opportunities that have come our way stemmed from the producers of those productions themselves. So with Kinky Boots, that team had heard of the work that we were doing as an organization and strongly aligned with our mission, and proposed the idea of us coming onto the production as a co-producer and giving the opportunity to our network of 51 alums to either invest themselves or raise, in addition to getting that practice of being co-producers on Broadway. It also allowed a group of us to get, off Broadway billing on a large and recognizable and successful show. It brought us into contact with the other co-producers and team members of that show. And there was also an educational component where it was sort of co-producer plus, where we would take feedback from our TPOC group and ask them what they wanted out of the experience, what questions they had about the process of bringing Kinky Boots to life, and finding moments of connection between us and the lead producers, so that we not only got to, support the show as co-producers, but also got a more hands-on educational experience from it as well.
Anand was just talking about this idea of like asking investors, what is it that you want from the show and how can I help you get it? It's awesome that you've been able to provide so many opportunities for new co-producers to continue to see the inside workings of Broadway. Somebody once recently told me that it's really Broadway's like apprentice model, right? Like you learn by doing and seeing. Mm-hmm. You've said that. And I feel like that's so true. You've been apprenticed to two-time Tony Award-winning Broadway producer, watching all the shows come to be. What kind of an apprentice would you hope to find in another opportunity? Like what's next for you in terms of your producing career?
Yeah, I think, it's been great to work under Ken because he has been so busy not only producing, but developing new projects as well. So I'm looking forward to continuing to work with him, with the goal being to eventually find a similar role for myself one day, to find the projects that I'm really excited and passionate about, and to be the lead producer of those as well. So in the meantime, I'm learning from Ken, keeping my eye out for other opportunities in the co-producing world, and I'm also interested in the independent sort of contractor world where a show might already exist, but they need a producer to hire to help them actually do the things. I'm interested in that as well. So I think, starting to take a look at this coming year, which is already looking to be quite full, to see where all those opportunities might lie.
Oh my goodness. Yeah, that's it's amazing sometimes how fast, like how much ahead things happen, like the backlog at each theater and the shows that want to come in. And it feels like the pandemic pause was just accelerated by this flood of making up for past time and also like new voices. Like it's the tsunami, if you will, of excitement on Broadway. I think that's really cool. What are you most looking forward to in terms of your projects now that you're involved in? What are upcoming, if you want to talk about it or talk about it vaguely, like what projects are coming in for you?
Well, Theater Producers of Color, which I already told you, is gearing up for its third year. We're announcing the opening of applications in mid-January. We also are going through a rebrand. So we're working with this agency, AKA, which we also use for all of Ken's projects, On a Beautiful Noise, Harmony, Joy, and Broadway Vacation. So they have just presented me with our new logo, and we're getting a website redesign. So it's very exciting where, this seed of an idea that I had in 2020 in this very childhood bedroom is now starting to seem like it's becoming a fully fledged organization. So that's very exciting. And, it will be sort of amazing that at the end of this coming year, we'll have 75 alums in our program. So I'm just excited for the work we're doing there to continue expanding and growing. Another organization that I co-founded during the pandemic is called the Industry Standard Group, which also seeks to increase access to producing and investing on Broadway to people of color. So we've started this investment vehicle called Second Act Theatrical Capital, 2ATC, which allows a whole community of people who've never necessarily had a seat at the table when it comes to Broadway investing and producing to now have the opportunity to do so. So they're able to make micro investments into 2ATC, then as a membership decide collectively what projects we are producers and representatives on. So that's very exciting because there are certain limitations in Broadway of who can be an investor. As I'm sure you know, you have to be accredited. That the minimum investment is usually, sometimes $25,000, sometimes even higher than that. So what we're doing with the Industry Standard Group and 2ATC is really knocking down those barriers to make producing and investing accessible to our community specifically. So that is all happening right now, which is very exciting. I guess the last thing, probably can't say yet, but I think another co-producing opportunity will be coming in the new year for a show in the 23-24 season. So I'm excited about that.
Oh, that's so cool. Are there things you talked about being in your childhood bedroom where the seeds of TPOC started? Did you know this would be your path? Like I know a little bit of your history. I know that like you saw Fun Home and you wanted to be a part of it in some way. Like what events in your life looking back have like prepared you for this moment?
It's really the art and the medium of theater that has driven me to be as curious and, hungry to learn as I think I have been. I think it's that passion and looking back at the shows that inspired me and wanting to make something just as good, if not better than those, that has sort of given me the fire to, have to put in the work and to, make the right connections and to, sort of dream about what the industry could be. I don't know if I have a great answer to that, but it's sort of, really, it's a tough industry to make a living in. So I think you really have to be a dreamer and fight for the art that you want to make, but also, decide what your values are as a producer and who you want to align yourself with, and what sort of community you want to center yourself in. So it's an interesting time to be a theater maker, for sure.
Well, you've definitely created a community with breadth and depth. I'm so impressed with your work, and again, how people revere you as a change maker in addition to being a theater maker. Congratulations. That's a lot of work.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been quite the year, but it's all very exciting.
Miranda, we want to let you have the last word. You talked about some of the projects you're excited about. Where would people find you? What are the websites, the socials, so that people can continue to follow your journey?
Yeah, so Theater Producers of Color is easy. Our website is theaterproducersofcolor.org. We do have social media, and our handle is TPOC_BWay. And the Industry Standard Group, our website is also, I think, easy. The industrystandardgroup.com, and our social handles are TISG_org. So feel free to find us there and reach out if you have any questions.
That's awesome. I'm sure you're taking donations for TPOC, for both of your initiatives, and then just keep eyes open on the playbill. It's so fun to see your name on some of the work this last fall. I was like, I know her. That's so cool. That's really fun.
Yeah.
Miranda, anything else you want to shout out before we wrap it up?
No, I think this is a great idea for a podcast, and I think it sounds like you've assembled quite the exciting lineup that a lot of people will be able to have some strong takeaways from. So congrats, and I'm excited to cheer you on.
Oh, thank you so much. Well, at least two of the guests are people that I met through you. So thank you for making it possible. That's awesome. Miranda, always a pleasure. Thanks so much.